dedicated to each and every one of you who appreciate a great glass of wine. You know what I mean?
It's Monday. Let's raise a glass to the beginning of another week. It's time to unscrew, uncork, or saber a bottle, and let's begin exploring the wine glass. Today, we return to Winephabet Street, where the letter of the day is D, and we are learning about the grape variety Delaware. Have you ever heard of Delaware? I had not, and that is one of the reasons why I loved working on this series. We had special guest Abby Stamp, assistant winemaker for Lakewood Vineyards in the Finger Lakes. We discuss her namesake wine, Abbey Rose, which of course has Delaware in its blend. If you enjoy exploring the wine glass, I'd appreciate you giving me some love by taking 2 minutes out of your day to write a review on whatever app you're listening to. It truly is the best way to support the show. Sláinte! Hey everybody, I'm Lori Budd, a UC Davis winemaking program, someday service, champagne specialist, and WSET Level 2 graduate. You can find Exploring the Wine Glass on all the socials, as well as your favorite podcast catchers. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to swipe, subscribe, rate, and review. I promise I'll never tell you what to drink, but I'll always share what's in my glass. Hey, everybody. All right. Hope everybody is having a great day today. We are back at Winephabet Street, and we are up to the letter D, and we are talking Delaware today. No, not the state, but the grape. And I'm excited because, honestly, when Debbie said, let's do Delaware, I'm like, all right, whatever. I didn't even know it was a grape variety. So I am excited to learn about Delaware today. And with Debbie and I today, we have Abby Stamp from Lakewood Vineyards and Winery in the Finger Lakes. So we're going to get to that. And so before we get to introducing Abby and all the fun stuff about Delaware, just to let you know, I am your co-host, Lori. I'm a WSET Level 2 graduate, UC Davis winemaking graduate. I am in the process of studying for the Spanish Wine Scholar Guild and champagne specialist and Côte d'Aron. And as we were talking off camera, we just love to torture ourselves. So that's why I just continuing to do that. So Deb, how about you?
I'm Debbie Giaquindo. I'm known as the Hudson Valley Wine Goddess. I'm a certified specialist of wine location specialist in port and champagne, and a certified sherry wine specialist. I'm author of the book, Tapping the Hudson Valley, Day Trips and Weekend Itineraries, Traveling to the Hudson Valley Wine Region. And I'm co-owner or partner in Trio North Wildwood. It's a restaurant in North Wildwood, New Jersey. So if you're visiting, we're open, come visit. And I'm also chairperson for the Hudson Valley Wine and Spirits Competition. And I think that's all that's on my plate right now.
See, torture ourselves. And Abby, can you give us a little brief introduction of yourself?
Yes. Hi, I'm Abby Stamp Wilkins, and I'm part of the Stamp family that owns Lakewood Vineyards Winery in the Finger Lakes. I'm the assistant winemaker there and a Cornell University graduate in viticulture and enology. And I've been full-time in the industry since 2013. So I'm really excited to be here tonight. Thanks.
Awesome. Cornell.
Thank you for joining us.
Smart. Very smart.
We start with A, B, C, and we go all the way to C. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Now I know my ABCs. Next time, won't you sing with me? Each letter makes a sound. Let's sound them out now. We start with ABC and we go all the way to C.
So tonight we are drinking Lakewood Vineyards Abbey Rose Delaware. And the label is incredible. It kind of reminds me of Guns N' Roses. But so I'm going to pour a glass. Let's pour a glass, do our little sláinte. Cheers.
Ooh, pretty color.
I know. And let's start learning about Delaware. So sláinte.
Sláinte.
Okay, we are set.
We are all set. So Abby, I just want to thank you for joining us tonight. And I'm really happy when I contacted Lakewood because become a winemaker and join the family business, because working for family is not easy.
So I've worked for other people, and comparatively, I think working for family is easy, but it's not something I always knew I wanted to do. Actually, I changed my mind like 30 times growing up as to what I wanted to do for a career. And it wasn't until my freshman year of college, actually, that I decided to pursue a winemaking degree. So I started off pre-med and, quickly changed my mind and decided to study viticulture and enology. But I think that somewhere along the line, I must have known subconsciously, because conveniently I was already going to Cornell, and there aren't many schools that have a winemaking program. So I was able to just transfer internally and start on that track. But I do have a couple siblings as well, and my brother Ben is also involved in wine business. Yes. And I think he came out of the womb screaming that he wanted to be a winemaker. Like, he was the opposite of me, always knew. And but I think it's the fact that we were always put to work, but we weren't told we had to stay there. We could study whatever we wanted, and as long as we were working, it didn't have to be in the wine industry at all. So the fact that it was really my choice, and in the end, I was like, what better business is there to be in than winemaking?
Did you have you had said you were pre-med, but while you were changing your mind into the viticulture aspect of it, do you prefer the vineyards, or do you prefer the winery? Because I know it's a flow from A to B, right? It is a flow, but sometimes people prefer being the outside part of it and then letting the winery do its thing, and other people like doing in the winery.
So I'm pretty much exclusively in the winery, and my degree was viticulture and enology, but you concentrate in one, and mine was in enology, so kind of on the path that I'm on right now. And I used to be in the vineyard a little bit more, but we've just gotten to the point that I don't have time, So my uncle is actually the vineyard manager, and he does a really good job with that. And I only make it out there rarely, more during harvest for sure, but the rest of the year I don't spend a lot of time in the vineyard.
So you work side by side with your dad?
Yes, my dad and my brother actually, and they're kind of clones of the same person, so it's really hilarious. We purchased another 100 acres or so there, which some has been turned to vine, but it's a lot of wooded area and fields too. So there's that, and then south, not even a quarter of a mile, we have another vineyard that is 100% Riesling, and then another mile and a half north, we have a vineyard that is just Niagara and Frontenac grapes on the opposite side of the road. So it's all within 2 miles, but it's not all adjoining.
And which lake are you on?
Oh, sorry, we're on Seneca Lake. So,
yeah, which finger are you on?
Yes, on the middle finger of the Finger Lakes, and it is also the deepest one. So originally,
you're on the west side of the lake.
Yes, we're on the west side, just north of Watkins Glen, which is a small town at the southern tip of Seneca Lake. So we are on the west side, and we're the first winery on the main state route there.
On the right.
Yep, on the right. Yeah, if you're driving north. Yep.
Okay. So now your grandparents actually started Lakewood. So can you give us a little bit more history of the winery itself? Like, how did they start it? Why?
Okay. So it actually goes back further to my great grandparents. Frank and Lucy Stamp actually moved to the Finger Lakes and bought Lakewood Farm in 1951. So kind of like their retirement job. My grandfather had been a dentist in the military, and I think they had been living in Maryland previously, but they had family here, bought a rundown peach and apple orchard, and then the following spring started planting grapes, and it kind of went from there. Of course, my grandfather was immediately dragged in, as well as his new wife, my grandmother, and they were put to work, and it ended up kind of being my grandfather's baby, the vineyard, and they were grape growers for many years until 1988 was the first vintage that the family started making wine. So at that point, there wasn't as big of a market for grapes. It was a lot of juice grapes, some hybrids, and everybody's having trouble selling their grapes. And it was kind of like a last-ditch effort for my family to not go bankrupt. My parents were living in Ohio at the time. My father was the extension enologist for Ohio State Ag Research Station, and but he had a food science degree and winemaking experience. So they all basically, my parents, grandparents, a family friend who is the only like non-family owner. He's also my godfather, so he's building. It was, the first vintage was 4,500 gallons of wine, so pretty small. And at that point, we had about 45 acres of grapes planted, so we were still selling a lot of the grapes from the farm. But basically, the thought was, my grandfather said, if this doesn't work out, this could be turned into a house. So yeah.
And you all can live here.
Yeah. So that was 7 different wines they made that first year, and now we make, I don't know the exact number, probably 18 or so for our label, and we've planted more varieties since, and now we make 120,000 gallons of wine, and it's grown, slightly over the years, but it's been steady and nothing huge all at once.
And now you're going strong. You have an awesome tasting room. You're buying more vineyards.
Yeah. I just tell my parents I wish they had more children because it's busy.
and Abby, how many different varietals do you have planted?
So we have I think 15 different varieties in the ground, and that's on about 95 acres now. And that's everything from Labrusca to French American hybrids to vinifera, really all over the place.
Wow. And now, so we're here to talk about Delaware, right? So can you tell us a little bit about, first of all, how have you always been growing Delaware?
Always, as long as I can remember. But
okay.
It was, back in the 50s, actually 1959 was when our older Delaware vineyard was planted. So not long after the vineyard started, or the farm started in general. It was put in the ground, and then another planting was put in 1995, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay. And so now, can you give us a little bit background on the grape itself, like its history? Is it considered a hybrid, or is it, is it American native? What exactly is it? And do you know who created it?
Kind of. So yes, it is generally considered a Labrusca, but really it is a hybrid. And it is first known in New Jersey, actually, in Frenchtown, New Jersey. Okay. And there's a gentleman there who was crossing grapevines, and Abraham Thompson got some of the cuttings and was really excited about them and sent them in to the Massachusetts Horticultural Society and labeled, because they were in Delaware, Ohio, it was labeled grapes from Delaware City, Ohio, and they just became called Delaware from there. And they were kind of favorable for wine because while they grow well in the harsher Northeast climate, they aren't quite as foxy as a lot of your Labruscas might be.
All right, so it's a Labrusca. Okay, awesome. Oh, as I'm tasting it, you can
you can taste it.
You can kind of see how it's related to it. But yeah, definitely not like that Labrusca that
right. It's a little
full in your face.
They've done they've looked into the genetics, and it was determined that it is a cross between vinifera and Vitis Labrusca and Estivalis. So they're thinking closer to half vinifera, which can explain why it in some ways behaves more like a vinifera. And then it obviously has some of those Labrusca characters.
Right. And that interested me too. It's like, all right, it's a cross between 3. So it's mom, dad, and cousin.
It was a threesome.
And whoever showed up over the fence, right?
Pretty much. I haven't been able to find the specific varieties that were the parents to the Delaware grape, so that remains unknown.
Yeah,
a mystery of wine.
Yep.
Yeah. Hey, lots of mysteries out there.
Yeah, these crazy immigrants just breeding grapes in their backyard, and came up with something special, I guess.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
So, Abby, you produce the Delaware Grape is in the Abbey Rose as a blend.
Yeah.
Is
So
it always a blending wine or a blending grape?
no, it is often, maybe even more often, used as a varietal, and there really aren't like a ton of them in the Finger Lakes anymore. I know a few wineries that do a varietal Delaware, but it is grown throughout the Northeast and in the Midwest as well. And while it can be like a blush often, I mean, the grape is considered a red grape, but it's really a dark pink color with it, as well as dessert wines. So many different styles with Delaware alone, or at least, 90% of the blend. Whereas we do it in this wine, it's only 15%, and it adds really something special, I think, because you do have those other Labrusca grapes in there as well that tend to dominate. This gives it a little something more delicate, I believe. So.
What else is in the Abbey Rose?
So it has Concord and Ives as well. And
Ives?
Ives, yeah.
That's a new one. I've never heard of Ives.
With
Also,
the Y or I?
with an I.
With an IVES?
IVES, yes.
Oh.
And not a lot of people grow that one anymore. But and then it's got a little bit of Vincent, which is a French-American hybrid that makes it that red color, because those grapes produce more of a pink wine to begin with, but it loses a lot of color through fermentation. So we want it to be a sweet red.
I was looking at the pictures of the Delaware grape on the bunches. The color is similar to me. I thought the color was similar to like the red Thompson seedless grape.
Yeah, a little bit, in that it's not really highly pigmented, but it's
Right.
red.
There's like a little bit of the grease, the gray color.
Yeah,
So
really.
it's kind of like the Thompson red.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Little smaller berries, but
smaller berries. Okay. So that was what I was going to ask you is like, tell us about the grape itself in the vineyard. So, a lot of winemakers say, oh, it's a great, about any grape. It's great in the vineyard, difficult in the winery. Other people say, oh, it's difficult in the vineyard, great in the winery. How does Delaware act in the vineyard, and then how does it correlate into the wine?
I'd say it's pretty favorable in both, really. From a winemaking perspective, it's usually a very easy, clean fermenter. It smells lovely during harvest, or during fermentation, really. It's
Here's
really
harvest.
And then it also, there's harvest.
Yeah, there's harvest.
Yeah. So clean fermenter. We don't have any problems getting it through fermentation. I mean, it presses off really quite well. Overall, it's not super finicky in the cellar, so I like it. And whenever we go to work with it post fermentation, it smells so pretty. So I have no complaints from a winemaking perspective. But in the vineyard, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. It is a little bit susceptible to downy mildew, but when I asked Dave, our vineyard manager, how he would rate it from like 0 being really difficult, 10 being incredibly easy, he said it's a 7. So compared to the Pinot and stuff we have right down the vineyard from it, it's a piece of cake.
Well, that's a statement right there. If compared to the Pinot, it's a piece of cake.
I'm not the one doing it, but and we have like I mentioned, 2 different vineyards. We have the one from 1959 and the one from 1995. And one of the vinifera-like characteristics of Delaware is that it is susceptible to phylloxera. And our older vineyard is actually own rooted. Oh. And the younger vineyard is grafted on 3309. And seems like with the vigor we have on that site, the own rooted stuff does just fine. Surprisingly. So, I mean, it's been there for over 60 years and no real issues. And then the grafted site is actually incredibly vigorous, and the canopy gets like a little crazy,
Okay.
especially on a wet year. And that's some of the Labrusca parentage there, but there's a lot of vigor with that one. So it has its challenges, I suppose, but overall.
Do you drop a lot of clusters during the course of growing?
No, that's not usually one that we need to drop fruit on. It's something that basically you control your yield as much as you can with pruning, and then you just let it all ripen. And most years we have no problem. So what's neat about Delaware, from a grape growing and winemaking standpoint, is that component for some of these blends as well. And it's just offset a little bit from when you're harvesting those, so they don't all fall on top of each other and make it too crazy.
Are they early harvesting or late harvesting? When do you usually harvest them?
Kind of in the middle, maybe towards the earlier side. So in 2021, it was end of September the 30th that we picked Delaware. 2020 was a couple weeks earlier, the 10th or 11th. And then 19 was actually into October. So, I mean, that tells you a little something about our climate in the Finger Lakes the last few years, but also, yeah, it's kind of on the earlier end, but not when you're first ones. Like typically we pick Niagara first, and then the Sylvania.
When do you pick that Niagara? When does your harvest typically start?
I tell people like first or second week of September typically, but
okay, so because I was like, wow, you're considering that early. I'm like, October for us is late.
So 19 it was kind of like a later harvest. So that was late for Delaware grapes, but I think it was like October 25th or 20th that we were picking Riesling. So, and when we do Riesling, it's a lot of tonnage. So that's kind of like, that's the later harvest stuff in my mind.
You have to make sure you have the room for it too.
Yeah, we got to save room. It's always fun juggling it.
All right, so let's talk about the Abbey Rose itself. So first, before we even get to the wine, just tell us about the label.
Okay, so I mean, we've in our 33 years of business, we've overhauled our labels a couple times, but this one was the most major one, and we did a similar one with like our Niagara and Catawba as well. So our sweeter, native and hybrid wines. We had a local artist design these actually, and we wanted it to be kind of nostalgic, but also fun and lighthearted. So you will notice across the board, all of our labels are vinifera as well, incorporate the rose logo. So, and that's actually what the second part of the wine name comes from our logo. And no, they do not have wines named after them. But
now I know you have Ben, but who's your other sibling?
My sister Amelia, she's a few years younger than me, and she actually lives in Vermont.
Okay.
Not currently involved in the wine business, but I think it's inevitable.
Just when you think you're out, they grab you and pull you back.
Yeah.
All right, so you had said that this has different varieties in it, and you had said Vincent gives it the color. So, okay, another grape variety.
Primarily for color. About. That's one of your French American like red ones. It's this really inky, almost black looking grape. It's not just the skin is colored, but the flesh is also red.
Oh,
so,
okay.
It's a really cool one. It's a mess to work with, but it actually smells really nice, and it is great to use in products like this where you want to just boost that color a little bit. Can do like 3%, and you don't really taste it. Well, you really don't taste it at all, and you can see it though. So that's where the Vincent comes in. Concord, I mean, you can definitely get that classic grape nose to it. Ives, to me, typically comes across as like fresh strawberries.
Yeah, I got the strawberry. That's what I wrote down.
And then once you
I have like a candied cherry also. Candied cherry also.
Yes, I could see that. I always like contribute the candy to the Delaware grape. For me, it's very candy-like. It's also very perfumey. It can have some floral notes to it. It's intense, and it's amazing that at the percentage in this is like less than half of what it is of Concord Ives, but it still shows through, and it gives that really sweetness, without as much of the fruit. I often say that this kind of smells like cotton candy.
Yes.
And I don't want to cheapen it, but it's just that really like sweet confectionery nose to it.
Well, now you know they have the Thompson grapes that are
the cotton
candy grapes.
And
yeah,
then,
I get candy cherry. I can get strawberry. I
really don't like honeysuckle scented things, and it took me a couple of years, and now I adore the aromatics in this wine, but it definitely was adjusting to that because it was something that I didn't have good associations with prior to that. But alone, we actually used to make a varietal Delaware. We called it long stem pink, adhering to the rose theme, but we ended up eliminating that product eventually because my theory is that it was too floral for a lot of consumers. It's kind of like Delaware is a tough sell, Gewürztraminer can be a tough sell to your average consumer because it is very intense and very perfumey, and you have to want that. And not everybody does. I think it's very polarizing, and I kind of think Delaware was like your native counterpart to that. So it wasn't one of our best sellers, though we do still do a dessert wine out of Delaware grapes. We are not featuring it now because we are completely sold out, but yeah, and that is a fun one too. We pick them late harvest and freeze them and press them.
Okay.
And you get some of those floral notes still, but it also goes more along the lines of like honey, apricot, maybe a little bit of pineapple in there.
Oh, wow.
So it makes a really nice dessert wine, and I think some other wineries are doing that as well.
With the Delaware grape?
Yes, with the Delaware grape.
So up in the Finger Lakes, who else produces wine from the Delaware grape?
So I think the Fulkerson Winery has a Delaware. I'm not sure if they call it that. And then Wagner produces a Delaware, and Chipika Wines, which and Kendall is half of, they do a Delaware Pet Nat.
Okay. Oh, wow.
And, actually, so this was weird that it was today, but we were tasting through dosage trials. Erin, who is, my aunt and also our vineyard manager's wife, she is our brand manager, but she's got a little side project we're working with her on called Little Grasshopper Wines. And they're Methode sparkling wines. And she hasn't released the first vintage yet, but there's a Riesling, a Cuga, and a Delaware. So today we're tasting through dosage trials for the Delaware. I think it was 2019 vintage. Okay. And it was amazing. It was incredible to see that wine that had been on terroir for a couple years. You still get some Delaware aromatics, but you get the yeastiness and the toastiness too. And it was incredibly complex. And it is known as a great sparkling wine grape, but not a lot of people do that around here anymore. So it's kind of,
with the rose.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of that IRF sweetness scale on Riesling. So we put it on all of our wines. If you're in the liquor store or the wine shop and you don't know what to get, this will give you an inclination of whether or not it will be to your style, to your liking. It is sweet. It's like 4.5% residual sugar, I believe, with this vintage. And the alcohol is under 10%. So that's not typical for this wine. It's usually 10.5, not very high. But those Concord Ives, they don't get incredibly high bricks. So you have less sugar to work with from the beginning. And 2021, which is the vintage we are all tasting right now, was a bit of a challenging vintage in the Finger Lakes. Really, really high yields and not a ton of sunshine and a lot of water, a lot of rain. So bricks across the board were lower, and we kind of just roll with it at Lakewood. Our Rieslings are going to be lower alcohol this year. They're 10 to 11.5 at the most. But, that's vintage variation. You got to take what Mother Nature gives you and make the best of it. And I like it for this wine because it is a super easy to drink wine. And when you have it, under 11% like that, you can have a couple of glasses and not feel like crap the next day on a Wednesday when you have to go to work. So
Right. And I have to say, I think that it's a little, the scale is a little misleading because it's not as sweet on the palate as I was expecting it to be.
yes,
By both the rose and the alcohol. I tell people all the time, okay, if you're in the store and you're looking for a sweetness level, but you don't know, mostly for Riesling, right? The higher the alcohol, the drier it's going to be. That's kind of like the general rule. And now a word from our sponsor. Exploring the Wine Glass is brought to you by Dracaena Wines. Dracaena Wines is an artisan winery located in Paso Robles, California. They have been producing wine since 2013. Their first vintage began with one wine, their classic Cabernet Franc, which received a 91 in Wine Enthusiast. Since then, they have increased production as well as expanded their portfolio, have received many accolades including multiple double gold medals and consistent 90-plus ratings. Visit their website www.dracaenawines.com or use the link in the show notes to schedule a private tasting and to see their entire portfolio. Purchase your award-winning wine and let Dracaena Wines help turn your moments into great memories. So at 9.9, and then you had the rose pretty high up there.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be sweet. So that lays claim to the acid that's in there, and I'm guessing some of the Vincent is bringing some structure, some backbone to it.
Yeah, I also think it depends on how you perceive sweetness, because to me, I can tell.
People smell some of these aromatics, and there's such sweet fruit notes. People that don't drink a lot of sweet wine are like scared that it's going to be cloying or heavy. And I think our goal with this is to keep it light, keep that acidity, and our picking decisions are based as much on acid as they are on sugar, because we don't want a flabby, gross wine. We want it to feel fresh, and we want you to want another sip because it's crisp on the finish. And luckily with some of these grapes, it's easy to keep a reasonable amount of acidity even if you let them hang for a while. So that is definitely, I think, what differentiates some of our sweet wines from other producers.
So the other tip I tell people, because I think a lot of people have difficulty when understanding that fruit can be sweet, like you can smell sweet and not be sweet at the same time, right?
Yeah.
So I learned, I don't know where I learned it, probably in the WSET or whatever, that if you think a wine is sweet, but you're not sure if it's the fruit or the sweetness of the actual wine, if you pinch your nose when you taste it, if it's still sweet, it's sweet. Whereas if it's the fruit that's ripe, basically, then it doesn't do that. Know, you're not tasting that sweetness anymore.
That's very.
So I just want to explain that because I'm going to pinch my nose, and for people who are watching, why I'm pinching my nose. But
so much of tasting is aromatics, and they influence what we actually think we're tasting too. But it's all part of that whole experience.
Right. And this, when you do pinch your nose, that you can still taste that sweetness. But I still go with that. It's not an in your face, overly sweet wine that like that syrupy sweetness. It's not that at all.
Right. And that's exactly what
it's very well balanced for the sweetness.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So you had mentioned that you actually look for, it's not just bricks level, you're paying attention to the acid levels and things like that also when you're harvesting Delaware. Is there anything else that rings the bell for you when it's okay, I'm going to harvest now?
I mean, whenever we're sampling, we obviously look at the condition of the grapes. If there's disease pressure or something, that might bump up your timeline a little bit, or you might have to go and drop some fruit at that point. And you want it's gonna just go up as you vinify that. So you want it to be in a range that it's easy to have it microbially stable when you go to bottle after it does raise. And aromatics and taste and the feel of them, if they're getting super soft, they're going to be closer. Just tasting them, and if they are showing those flavors that you want in Delaware, that's a good indication. You can also smell these grapes when you walk through the vineyard when they're getting close to time to pick. So,
oh wow,
also another indicator.
that's awesome.
Here they bring the birds.
Yes. The birds don't love Labrusca grapes.
Oh, they like vinifera better?
Oh yeah, they like, Gewürz, Pinot Noir, mostly. Yeah.
Pinot
They've
Noir.
got expensive tastes.
I love Pinot, but there's so many problems with Pinot.
It
There's
is a
so many
problem
problems.
child. It's lucky it's so delicious. Otherwise,
Absolutely. How much of the Delaware do you guys actually have planted, and do you sell any of that off?
we have about 5 acres planted between the 2 blocks, and we use it all for ourselves. And we actually also purchase some Delaware locally. So our farm, we use all the grapes except some Concord and Niagara, which we sell to Welch's. And then we also subsidize with grapes from other farms, all local, 100% Finger Lakes, always. And we have some growers that we've worked with for many, many years. So we've got some really good relationships there, and it gives us more options when we're blending and such. So we actually will ferment our different Delaware blocks separately and then taste through. We do make other products for some other wineries as well, and that was included in the gallonage I told you earlier. So we'll pick a specific lot for our Abbey Rose. We'll pick another one for like a blush, say we might make, and that just depends on your goal with the wine. We'll decide ahead of time at harvest we're going to be able to make our dessert wine, and those will let hang a bit longer. And we, for that product, we always the dessert wine.
Wine.
Yes. So
and then I missed out after that.
And the balance of our estate fruit or estate Delaware will go to the Abbey Rose. And then if we need a little bit more, we can subsidize it from the other vineyards that we purchase from. But typically our estate fruit is enough to do the iced wine and the Abbey Rose. And then the other ones we purchase go to the wines we make for other accounts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We try to prioritize estate fruit for our Lakewood Vineyards products.
Makes
Fair
sense.
enough.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. So in drinking this wine, besides like on a hot summer night or hot summer day or drinking by the pool, that's what I think of. What kind of food would you pair this with?
So I find that the Abbey Rose is delicious with pretty much anything cheese focused. So just cheeses alone, some cured meats, but also like a pasta salad with cheddar in it. It's good with barbecue even, especially if you have like a honey barbecue sauce on it. But just pork in and of itself has a sweetness. So a nice smoky pork dish is also a good pairing with this if you're trying to do it with like a main course. And of course, anything that has strawberries in it isn't too sweet. It's not a dessert wine, but if you have a slightly sweet dessert and some fresh fruit in there, it makes a nice pairing that way.
Mm-hmm. I can see that, definitely.
So I'm thinking this might be, and Debbie knows I'm horrible at food pairing because I don't eat anything. But I'm thinking this actually can go, everybody's like, oh, wine and chocolate. And that's really an actual difficult pairing.
It's so
to
hard.
Mm-hmm.
But I can think of like some of those chocolate cakes that are not, not like the lava thing that's ooey gooey chocolate,
Right.
but like the drier chocolate like cakes.
Yeah, with like a cream cheese ingredient too. That's less.
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
see.
Actually,
Yeah,
I made
can actually see chocolate.
I made a salted caramel dark chocolate pie, and I think this would go good with it.
Probably.
Yeah, I can see dark chocolate going, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
really, I think it would taste really good, and it would give it that fruit element that would go well with the dark chocolate and then the salted caramel. And an Oreo cookie crust, it was really good.
You see it.
Yeah, that sounds.
We're kind of getting close to the end. And one of the things we always want people to know is like, they're listening to the podcast or watching the webinar, and there's so much information that you've supplied to us about Delaware. So I'm going to ask you if you can if you can give us like 3 like fast facts, like if you want 3 things that people are going to walk away from this podcast or webinar from remembering about Delaware, what would they be?
Well, I definitely want it to be things that will make people want to drink Delaware. Actually, I'm going to go on a quick tangent first because I think it's really interesting that there's a lot of talk about, natives and hybrids with climate change and whatnot. A lot of people are using these grapes for pet nets and trendier styles, natural wine and stuff. There are a few producers doing that in New York State. So I do think it's one of those ones that might kind of come back in, for a while it was Harold. Oh yeah. Well, we'll consider this one of my points about Delaware, but it was heralded as one of like the best wine grapes that was growing in the eastern U.S. In the late 1800s and early 1900s. It has like fallen out of fashion since then. I don't think necessarily forever. I think it's one we can rely on, even with vintages being vastly different from year to year. I think that it can make a very complex wine, and that's, to me, really important. There are a lot of nuances to it, especially when it's done in like a sparkling style or a drier style table wine. And then the complexity it can add to a wine like this. This wine would not be the same without the Delaware grape. And it can just be done in a million different styles. Like I said, dry, bottled.
Awesome.
Very beloved in actually like Japan and South Korea for a sparkling wine grape. And I wonder if that is something that might become more popular here. Maybe not, but.
Wow.
So people from those countries, do they come to the Finger Lakes and buy?
No, it is grown in Japan and South Korea.
Oh, it's grown. Okay, I didn't hear that.
And they produce the sparkling wine out of it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Wow. And then I have to point this out because this was in the box. This was in the box. So this is Beverly.
Yeah, so that's my grandmother.
Okay, so there's Grandma and David.
Yep, the vineyard manager and my
vineyard manager, and then Chris.
Chris is my dad.
Your dad.
You can tell by the tan there which one works in the vineyard, right?
That is.
And then the back has got all the wines that you produce.
It's got some of the wines that we produce with the varieties that are in the last couple of years, but yes, sustainably farmed. We plant north to south to prevent more erosion. We try to minimize the spray we use. We have solar panels and we have a compost facility. So all of the pumice from harvest and fermentations or just from pressing off, we actually compost. We combine it with chicken manure and we'll spread it back in the vineyard. So that's really neat too.
You have a weather station, native plants.
Question though, it says here the Delaware, found in I can't pronounce.
So Glacio Vinum is the name of that dessert wine I was talking about.
Oh, okay, and so that dessert wine has aromas of orange, banana, ginger, and vanilla bean.
Yeah,
got it.
Kind of more the spicy.
Yeah.
And a dog. Who's the dog?
Oh, that looks like it might be Cake Pan. We have like a number of different dogs running around the winery on any given day, but Cake Pan is the vineyard dog. It's Dave's dog, who his daughter named when she was 4 years old. Yeah, but he makes frequent appearances in the tasting room, when he's got to come in and cool off.
Absolutely. Very important. Very important to make visits to the tasting room. Winery dogs are very important.
Yes, they are. Bring your dog.
And smart enough to go inside when it gets too hot.
Yeah. I think he's just there for the free crackers, but
yeah. Most dogs are.
Yeah, but they provide another attraction in themselves. So there's that, I suppose.
Yes, absolutely.
So Abby, tell us where people can find you and Lakewood Vineyards, if you want to reveal where you're found on social media, but Lakewood Vineyards on social media, on the web, how people can set up to come taste with you, where you're located.
Okay, so We are on Seneca Lake on the west side of the lake, just about 4 miles north of Watkins Glen on Route 14. Our Instagram is just Lakewood Vineyards, and we are Lakewood Vineyards on Facebook. Our website is lakewoodvineyards.com. So I'm seeing a trend here.
Seeing a trend.
We are actually, our tasting room is open 361 days a year. So we have 4 days off. And we're open Monday through Saturday, 10 to 5 and noon to 5 on Sundays. You do not have to make a reservation, but if you're coming on the weekend, I would recommend it just so you don't have to wait. But if you do end up having to wait, there's a lovely lawn and you can take the vineyard tour. So
Yeah, it looks like it's a pretty
Way back, this has got to be in the early 2000s or something, maybe late 90s. I don't even remember, but I have a picture of me and my husband at Lakewood Vineyards just over Seneca Lake. I'll have to dig that out. That was like my first visit up there. So yeah.
Well, we
have driving back and forth to Buffalo where I went to college. So
okay. We've done some landscaping efforts, and we put on an addition in 2016. So it's actually even prettier now. You can see the production room and the tanks as you walk into the winery. So floor to ceiling windows there, which is pretty neat. And just a nicer place, I think, to hang out than it was 10 years ago.
And you have events as well, don't you?
Yeah, we do some events. We do. We participate in the Seneca Lake Wine Trail events, and then we do some smaller events here and there, and those are usually all over our social media.
And that's how people can find out about them.
Yep, absolutely. And our website. But I would just check our Facebook and our Instagram, and you will be up to date.
Well, Abby, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's for me, it's wonderful to see you as a person and how you've grown into the woman that you are and the winemaker. It's like I'm dating my age here, but it's just wonderful to see you prosper in the wine industry.
Well, thank you. I'm excited that I get to do stuff like this with people that are paving the way, like you ladies. So I appreciate that. Pretty lucky to be here.
Well,
thank you for sharing Abby Rose with us and for sharing your knowledge of Delaware. I think these episodes of the not so familiar grapes are always the best episodes because there's just so much learning that can happen. I mean, again, not to pick on Pinot, but everybody knows Pinot, So, it's these episodes that are the not on the tip of your tongue varietals that really are, at least to me, the most exciting. So
I feel the same way because I like bringing new things to people. And so this is, something that people don't have a knowledge of,
So thank you very much. We appreciate your time. We appreciate the wine. It is beautiful. So we will raise our glass.
Beautiful, just like you.
Yeah.
Thank you for
thank you very much.
Cheers. Cheers.
This has been another episode of Exploring the Wine Glass. Thanks for listening. If you have suggestions on what topics you would like me to discuss, please reach out on social media. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as Exploring the Wine Glass. I am also on LinkedIn as Lori Hoytbud. Of course, you can always email me at exploringthewineglass@gmail.com. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe to help others find me more easily. And most importantly, tell your wine-loving friends, because if you like the podcast, they will too. Music is Wine by Kevens. Until next week, sláinte.
So you and I